Thanks for coming out to reInvent, everybody. I know it's been a challenge to get here, especially in these crazy times we live in, but really excited to tell you a very important foundational story today, which I'll go into in a moment. So in a moment, we're going to have Dennis and Jeff from State Farm speak. Dennis will go into the platform they built and the business case and value behind it, and Jeff will go into the tech, which is my personal favorite because I'm a solution architect, a principal solutions architect at AWS in the financial services business unit. Been here about 3 years, and prior to that, I was a CTO at an insurance company, so I really can relate to State Farm and really all insurance companies' journey. So if some of you, I assume, are familiar with the 4 stages of cloud adoption, really important and kind of sets the stage for this story and this architecture and this solution. The 4 stages are, you first start with a project. You get going with the cloud. You form a small 2-pizza team, and you build something in a matter of weeks or 3 months, no more. So to really understand how rapidly you can build things, that's what it's about. This solution that State Farm built falls in the foundation stage, which is where you really need to automate all the processes, the DevSecOps, the governance, the monitoring, the things that your builders are going to use to rapidly iterate and build things for the business. That's what it's about. It falls in the foundation stage. This is critical to build automated solutions and really spend time in this stage. Next stage is migration, where you lift and shift and move your existing apps. And lastly, reinvention, where you build things that you couldn't previously have built, and you build net new workloads in the cloud. You get going perhaps with machine learning, you stop talking about it, and you start doing something with it, for example. That might be in the reinvention stage. So let me tell you, let you consider what a lion tamer does, right? How does a lion tamer do his or her job? The lion tamer has a whip in one hand and a 4-legged stool typically in the other. The whip is just a prop. It's a circus prop for show. Everyone thinks the whip tames the lion, but no, it doesn't. The 4-legged stool actually, when the lion, and this is scientifically proven, I heard this story, so don't look that up, but I believe it to be true, right? Looks at the 4-legged stool, and the lion can't focus because it gets confused. So the important thing, while you're going through each one of these stages, you form a 2-pizza team, you get people together full time, and you focus on each stage instead of freezing. And the problem a lot of our customers have is they freeze because there's so much to do, right? It's so confusing, it's so overwhelming. After reInvent, you're going to go back and have 82 new services and functionality to deal with. Don't worry about that. That will come if you get your people together, get them full-time on it, form small teams, and focus on each stage. You won't freeze. Really, really important to consider and keep that in mind. So the next, this slide really depicts the great stall, and this is what I was just talking about. A lot of customers fall into the trap of waiting for AWS services to be adopted. I'll never forget the time when I was talking to an account manager. She was from China. We were in New York. This was pre-COVID. We were whiteboarding a solution, and I kept putting AWS services up and doing a data flow. And she said, nope, can't use that. Not approved. Nope, not approved by my customer yet. So really the challenge of limiting your services that are the tools that are in your toolbox is super blocking to our customers. So that's what we call the great stall. You're waiting for things to be adopted. So this story and this workload is really about how to rapidly approve services and how to rapidly approve workloads. There is a way, there is a better way, right? So our customers love prescriptive guidance, right? Who doesn't? Tell me what to do. We created a FSI, Financial Services Industry, Spotlight Series blog posts, right? And the blog posts cover 5 key areas, which are listed here. How do you achieve compliance with the regulators, with your cloud workloads, with your services? How do you protect data at rest and in transit? How do you know your data is secure and you're not going to end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the whole ransomware thing? There's ways to do this, right? There's ways to automate it. Isolating your compute when you have very secure and critical workloads. How do you isolate that compute environment, that network, so it's like in your own private data center? Right, automating audits with APIs. I remember my first SOX audit, and I care not to remember it, but it was a very painful exercise. The one question I got from a PwC auditor was, yeah, John, your claim system, can you tell us about, oh, you had 200 different change requests the past year. We're going to pull a sampling out, and what we want you to do is for the sample that we pull out of those 200, we want you to show evidence that it was approved by the business, it was tested, and everything was deployed into production according to your processes. And that was like Lotus Notes, and that was emails, and it was a nightmare, right? So automating audits with APIs and tracking that and having auditor-friendly reports out of the box is a dream, and you can do that with the cloud, right? It's the underlying consistency and transparency that drew me and my team, right, when I was CTO at an insurance company, to the cloud, because every single service is called via a series of API actions. And every single API action under each service, guess what, is logged. So you have evidence of everything that occurs with those API actions. And then you translate that into reports, and there's your automated audits, right? And operational access and security, who has access to your data, your databases, your systems. So I encourage you, and there's some links, so you can take some shots with your phones, or you can download the slide deck afterwards, but some really good links here to that FSI Spotlight blog series, as well as to the original blog that kind of started all, that touches upon and defines these 5 key areas. We have 10 services that are currently part of the blog series, more being added every month. And for example, Athena, which is one of my favorite services, the number 4, automating audits with API section of that blog post covers 12 API actions that you need to pay attention to. Let's say Athena has 50, I don't know off the top of my head, but all you need to do is pay attention to 12 in order to secure your data and to ensure you avoid unnecessary charges. So super important, super prescriptive. Every blog follows the exact same set of headings, the exact same prescriptive guidance, and it's directly related to approving these services and approving the workloads, your workloads in production. So really can't stress that enough. So really, how do you build a solution like State Farm built, right? They did it a little different way, and the reason why they did it a different way, I always love to say computer science is not just a science, it's an art. So you can choose what services you want. There is no right or wrong way. If it works for you and gets the job done, it does. And what I really like about the story, and Dennis will go into this a little bit, is how they took into account the culture of State Farm and all the people and how they worked in the organizational structure. You can't necessarily apply the same thing in every organization, obviously, right? But here are a series of services, right, that cover those 5 key areas that you should be concerned about to approve your workloads and approve your services in your organizations. I'll touch upon just a few for lack of time, right? But AWS Artifact allows you to download SOX and PCI third-party audit reports that they came into AWS and did and performed. You can download and leverage those, right, for your own benefit because you're using the AWS platform. Audit Manager, really important, one of our new services. It has out-of-the-box GDPR compliance, let's say you're interested in, right? So out of the box, you can create a GDPR compliant audit report and demonstrate to your auditors that you're GDPR compliant. If you use Audit Manager, right, what it does is it monitors those APIs, the Cloud Trail logs, and it converts them into auditor-friendly reports. And that's an out-of-the-box framework that's part of Audit Manager, and you can do your own custom frameworks as well. So really cool service. 2 others I'll touch upon. Config, really important, helps you automate audits, right? We have a bunch of rules out of the box. You can write your own rules, and it monitors continuously the configuration of your workloads, of your services. Somebody make an S3 bucket public, alarm goes off, it reverts back to private, right? So you can have automated control, you can have transparency. That's the consistency, transparency of the platform, okay? And lastly, the well-architected pillar. One of the key foundational principles of our AWS security is to keep operators and people away from data as much as possible. And that's described in that link more in our well-architected framework security pillar document, white paper. So this is my last slide, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dennis. But I wanted to, and again, hopefully like the stages of cloud adoption, some of you have seen this. This is our shared responsibility model. And really, you're blue and AWS orange, right? That's why our lanyards are orange, I guess. Coincidence? Maybe not, I don't know. But the idea here is we take care of security of the cloud, the data center, the running it. You guys are responsible for security in the cloud. Now, what if I told you there was a way to do less blue? Would you like to do less work? Well, who wouldn't? So that orange goes upward, right? And you're going to do less work. That's why on the right, I have serverless first, right? The great thing about serverless is you do less work. You don't have a virtual server to install and run. You don't have a virtual server to upgrade and patch and monitor and scale and load balance. You don't have to do that. I'm not saying that serverless meets all your needs. There's great reasons for EC2 instances and virtual servers, right? There's an important category of reason of why you would select these when you're designing a solution. But think of this. Many of our customers are serverless first customers. Not serverless only, but serverless first. Then you go to manage infrastructure like ECS or Fargate containers, right? Then you go to manage services like relational database service. And finally, if you have a bespoke piece of code or you have a commercial off-the-shelf application like Guidewire, a lot of us use in insurance, for example, other products, ALIP, what have you, then you go and you do EC2 instances, okay? Something to really consider. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. Jeff Barr wrote a blog post, and he referred to a Jeff Bezos presentation that Jeff did at MIT in 2006. And I'm paraphrasing here. So I want to get it right, so I want to look at it, right? Jeff said in 2006 to MIT, he said, the goal of AWS is to share the common behind-the-scenes functionality that Amazon has built over 11 years, now 26, right, because that was 15 years ago. So share the common behind-the-scenes functionality that Amazon has built with builders so they can get right to building the functions, the apps that add value to the business. So you want to get quickly to done. You want to build something. You want to do the business logic. You know, you don't want to have to acquire the servers, provision the servers, set up the network, do all this stuff, right? You want to get to the business functionality and form a great partnership with the business and create less friction with the business. And I'm really passionate about this stuff because that's what I did when I was an AWS customer. And it was amazing. We had the customers in the business, the actuaries, the underwriters, were with us every day, fired up about the apps. Oh, hey, can you make this change? Oh, hey, what were the stats last night? What were the log events? What's going on? And it was a great experience. So I'm going to hand it over to Dennis now, and at the end, I will come back and invite you to a couple of events and give you a couple of reminders about something. But here you go, Dennis.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. I'm part of the public cloud adoption team at State Farm, and one of the phrases that I like to use when we talk about governance, risk, and compliance is that governance done right speeds you up. The developers want and need clarity. They simply want to know, what must I do? What must I never do? And where don't you care that I can do the flexibility and solve the problem however I need? So one of the things we do is we talk about a car analogy. When you get a new car, if you're driving down the road and you start to drift out of your lane, a voice comes from above or a light flashes or the steering wheel vibrates, and it kind of tells you you're going where you're not supposed to be. Even though we have that control or that risk mitigation, we still cut grooves in the side of the road. So if you drop onto the shoulder, suddenly your whole car is vibrating and it's telling you you're not where you're supposed to be. But even with those, we still put guardrails. Now, where we put a guardrail is where there's a catastrophic event if you go off the road. But when you hit a guardrail, it causes damage, right? It prevents you from going off, but you still pay a price. So what we're trying to do is build a solution so that we guide people along the way and we make it easy to do the right thing, hard to make a mistake, and we want to prevent/document malicious behavior. So our goal with what we built was to replace our opinion-based risk model with a data-driven one. And what used to take months to go through, we have a goal of a single 30-minute meeting. Now, I got to be transparent. We haven't met that goal yet, but we've got it done in under an hour. So when you think about an opinion-driven model, it's served us well, but opinions are a lot like, well, let's just say everybody has one and no two are the same. So we need to move to where we're equipping our executives with data so that we can make those data-driven models. So what we've got here are the organizational benefits. From an automation standpoint, simply reduction in manual tasks simply allows people to focus on solution development instead of the activities that they really don't want to do as a developer. Scalability, the ability to scale audit tasks. When you make the auditor's job easier, you make your own job easier.
Want to advance the slide? Is that
Nope, I'm still on the right slide.
the one on the right, the one on the left?
Oh,
the one that's
pardon me.
Yeah, so there.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no.
Efficiency, focus on the high-risk areas so that we can enable efficient use of our resources. And lastly, confidence, right? When we know through transparency where the platform is, we know what we can do then as far as decision-making. So as an example, in March of 2019, like a lot of companies, we had to respond to COVID. And you can imagine a company like State Farm with 100,000 plus people that we had to enable suddenly to work remote. So how do you educate? How do you enable? How do you make that occur? Because of the confidence we had in our platform, our executives were able to make a rapid decision that in the past would have taken weeks, if not months, and make a decision to pivot to AWS Connect so that we could equip our people to work from home. And that is strictly due to the confidence in the transparency of the platform. So here, one of the foundational steps is we require automation. We do not let our developers go in to console and build their solution direct. We require the coding of all of our infrastructure. So all the use cases must script their build, and then we do allow for break-the-glass scenarios where we have a problem. And what's been interesting over the last couple of years, we've seen people actually proactively reach out to us and tell us, hey, tonight at 7 o'clock, I'm going to go in. So rather than us get the notification and reach back out and validate why they did something, they're starting to reach out ahead of time to us, which is really awesome to see. And what this enables us to do then is scan the code as well as scan the asset so that we can really make sure we understand what's being implemented. By the way, if anybody tells you you can have full-size sheets of paper up here, they're wrong. So scalability, again, you've heard me talk about making auditors' job easier. Same thing with control testers. When they come in and they want to see procedures and they want to look over your shoulder, now when they come in, we simply point them to our dashboard and we have them go look there, as well as even our auditors. Now when they use our dashboard, they use it not only to audit us, but they actually use it to audit the use cases as well. We did actually have internal audit help us from a consulting standpoint as well as outside auditors when we went ahead and built the solution so we knew it would pass any type of audit that was coming up. So how did we do this? When we started with our journey down the path of enabling AWS, we created a true worst case scenario. Now, when I say worst case scenario, what I'm really talking about is a very complex on-prem, multi-cloud, hybrid model so that we could take that use case and then build a control structure around it. The concept was that if we could get people comfortable with the worst case, anything less than that should be comfortable as well. So that concept has served us well. We could have done it with our first use case that we actually enabled in AWS, but that was a low-risk use case. So we would have been understating our risk as well as have to go back and re-explain it every time we had a new use case go on board. So establishing that worst case or that complex scenario really served us well. Again, the next stair step is our DNR process, and I'm going to pass that over to Jeff here in just a second, and he's going to explain more of the technology behind it. But our DNR process is detect, notify, and remediate. And you're going to hear me after Jeff talks, I'm going to explain distillation. And really what we're talking about is kind of that Rosetta Stone. because the risk people have their own language, information security has yet a different, then you have the developers, and then you have auditors, and then throw legal in. So controls exist for one reason only, and that's to mitigate a risk. So I have the luxury of working with an awesome information security department. They don't need me to tell them every control they need, but where they do need the risk side is to understand kind of where to stop and when is the control structure enabled for the right level of use case. And then lastly, as we start to look down new controls or additional controls, that understanding of what is the control cost, right, in terms of money as well as efficiency on the engineer side, all the way to how much risk mitigation are we getting. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jeff Michaels, and he's going to talk more about DNR.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Michaels. I'm a security analyst at State Farm and the product owner for the DNR application. As Dennis mentioned, the DNR application stands for Detect, Notify, and Remediate. We look at this as a continuous cycle of finding, alerting, and fixing security vulnerabilities that we find within State Farm's AWS infrastructure. So the DNR application was built completely in-house using AWS services. It was written in Python and is actually deployed on ECS Fargate. In fact, everything that we talk about up here, all of our code, it's all serverless. We're not running it on any virtual servers at all. And then the findings that come out of this DNR application get stored in DynamoDB so we can quickly query and do searches on the information. To give you some information about kind of how State Farm is structured and what the tasks are around the DNR, State Farm organization actually has around 400 accounts associated to it for a variety of purposes. These are test accounts, production business use cases, proof of concept accounts. So we've got about 400 of those that we have to be scanning all the time in order to try to discover these vulnerabilities. Also, these accounts are constantly coming and going. So we're constantly having to make sure we register new accounts, deprecate old accounts, and the DNR application actually does this automatically within our State Farm infrastructure. The scans themselves, we run on a periodic basis. We have either hourly or daily scans. Vast majority of our scans are actually hourly. We have around 90 tests that we're running against each account. So if you look at it, we have around 400 accounts, 90 tests that we're running. That's around 36,000 tests that we're running every hour against all of our accounts. Of course, this is multi-threaded because otherwise it would take forever to actually complete. And also, we have a process in place that actually can allow us for exceptions to these individual tests and findings, which is important because there are legitimate reasons why you might want to allow an external AWS account access to your S3 bucket. Right now, we detect if there's a non-State Farm account that has access to an S3 bucket. There are cases where maybe you're working with a vendor or SaaS provider and they need to have access based on their solution. So we have an exception process in place that allows these exceptions to be granted, and then we can add them to either an exception table if they're a static resource, or we can tag them with a specific value if it's more of an ephemeral resource like an EC2 instance. Now, the important thing to note is these findings are stored as exceptions. They may pass the test, but we know it is an exception. That way we can track the exception on an ongoing basis, follow up, make sure that this exception is still valid, things of that nature. So the tests themselves, they're customizable. Each one is actually a packaged Python script that is consuming a common DNR framework. This has some advantages. So for example, by packaging up each of these individual tests as separate scripts, if something goes wrong with an individual test, it wasn't written correctly, I mean, we do have automated test cases and things, but if something were to go wrong or if AWS were to change an interface for any reason, it would affect that specific test and none of the others. And everything would continue to run through for the rest of the test just fine, and we would be notified that there was an error. New test development begins as a request from a business area, usually through some sort of distillation process or as a security finding that we have within the organization. A finding is found, they come to us, say, can we check for this within the organization? And we look at it, define what the requirements are, and code it up. Each of these tests, they're pretty small. They're really around 50 lines of code. Some of our more complex ones can be around 300 to 400 lines of code, but they're not actually very, very large pieces of code. And the development on it usually takes less than a week. The majority of the time is actually centered around business partner communications and documentation. We actually maintain a DNR cookbook site within State Farm that has all of our tests listed and all of the documentation about how you can resolve a finding for it. That way, our business partners don't have to guess as to, oh, what am I supposed to do to make this thing, to make this finding go away. We tell you exactly what needs to happen. We have references to AWS documentation so that the business partner can correct it. We do have several environment-specific tests that are kind of unique to State Farm based on the infrastructure we have. So a good example is we don't allow IAM local users console access to the AWS console. There's a reason for that, because we actually federate this from an external identity repository. So because we do that, we can assume that any local IAM user that has console access is a backdoor account, and we automatically remove that access for it, which we'll kind of go into in the remediation portion of this. So this diagram is this very simple diagram of kind of how the DNR application works from the scanning perspective. So in the middle, we have the DNR framework, which is a series of scripts that are essentially a bunch of classes that you can call to standardize your data inputs and stuff. And that makes a call to our State Farm organization icon, which gets a list of all of the accounts that we have at State Farm. So that's how we know about all active State Farm accounts that we have. Then the DNR application will take those accounts and kick off all of those tests and run them for each of those accounts. And those tests go out and contact the AWS resources to get their configurations, pull them back, and then to determine whether or not those configurations meet our criteria or not, and if not, boom, you got a finding. Then it takes that information, publishes it to the DNR framework, which writes those findings to a DynamoDB database. The next piece we have is notifications. So there's multiple notifications that we have through our application. The first one is a daily notification. This is an email, actually, of all the findings relating to a specific account. And we actually send those to what we call the account administrators. For every account at State Farm, you have at least 2 account administrators. And those are usually lead analysts who know and understand the business use case that is being run within their account. And their job is they're responsible for those findings and making sure that the team who needs to fix those is aware of this and there's a plan to get it resolved. We actually take that, in that email notification, we actually sort it by escalation date. So the ones that are going to be escalated first, which we'll talk about here in a second, they go at the top. So they know this is coming up first, so take care of it. And we actually utilize Amazon's simple email service to send those email notifications. Then we have a manager notification. This is a pretty simple one. It's just a heads up. So for the account administrators, we just send their managers the report. If it's going to be escalated within 7 days, we just send it to them as a heads up saying an escalation is going to happen. You might want to follow up on this, or at the very least make sure that the next notification is not coming as a surprise. And that is our leadership escalation. So we have an email of the findings that have exceeded a defined escalation period for each test. And this gets sent to what we call an account signatory. So for each account, we also have an account signatory, and they are an executive business use case owner. So this is in the leadership level in our organization. They are the ones that approved of this business use case actually going in at State Farm. And if the finding has exceeded that escalation time period, we send a notification to them and let them know. We also carbon all the account administrators on that notification and list it in the email so that The executive knows exactly who to contact if they have any questions. And these escalations vary in length. It's pretty much based on the severity of the findings, so 7, 30, 60, or 90 days after discovery. And this is kind of this is the diagram of how that works. So on the left, we have the detect portion of the application with the organizations and resources writing to the DynamoDB, the findings to the DynamoDB table. Then we have Lambda functions that actually query that DynamoDB table to find all the findings for the specific accounts, format an email, and send it to the account administrators or to the account signatories. And this is run on a timed basis. But now the last piece of this whole thing is remediation. I've got in parentheses there mitigation, and I'll explain why in a second. And basic remediation is the corrective actions you have to take to resolve a finding. They can be automated or manual, and when I say manual, what I mean is we leave it to the business partner to resolve it. We maintain that online cookbook I was talking about earlier with like frequently asked questions and examples, so if they want to know how to fix it, that cookbook's there. We have links to it in the notification email. Go to it, find out what you need to do. The other piece that we have is automated remediation, and these are a series of Lambda functions that actually will go out and remove the risk. I don't say fix the problem necessarily because in some cases we don't know how to fix it. So automation could mean we remove the risk, which is destroy the resource or shut the resource off. Of course, that can have business implications as well. So we generally reserve automated remediation for more critical findings so that it's less likely that we're going to have a lot of ongoing business disruption. And like I said, these actually utilize AWS Lambda functions and that actually perform these activities. They can be either event-based or they can be scheduled. So if they're event-based, we're looking at CloudTrail logs, looking for specific actions that occur, and then we kick off a Lambda function to perform the remediation. For the scheduled stuff, we actually have it set up so that the DNR application itself, which I just showed you as part of the detect portion, can actually schedule a remediation to occur. So if, let's say we do not want to take immediate action, but we want to, say, give them time to try to resolve it, and if they don't, get rid of it. So maybe we escalate it to the leadership within 30 days, and if you still haven't taken care of it, we remediate it in 60 days. And by the way, that information is also sent in our notification, so they know if when we're going to escalate it and when we're going to remediate it, if we have remediation for it. Whenever we do any type of remediation action, and this is important, we notify the account administrators we did it. We do not want we tell them exactly what we did, to what resource, and when we did that. That is important because we don't want the business, if it is disruptive, we don't want the business partner spending a lot of time trying to troubleshoot it. We want to tell them that this activity occurred and why, so that they can go in there, figure it out, and try to take care of it as soon as possible. We usually give them plenty of opportunity, but like I said, in the more critical cases, like maybe someone made data publicly accessible, we take action immediately and we send them a notification telling them that that event occurred. So this here is kind of a diagram of kind of how we do that. Again, on the left, we have the detect portion with the organizations and resources, and the new icon is at the top where we have event-based triggers. So this is looking at CloudTrail, and if we see certain activities that are occurring, we can trigger those Lambda functions. Otherwise, the detect portion, the DNR application, can actually do a scheduled trigger of those same Lambda functions, which can then remediate those resources and then send a notification email to the account administrators. So now I'm going to turn this back over to Dennis, who's going to talk about how they use the DNR information and the benefits of it.
Thanks, Jeff. So what you've just heard is about our DNR process, and the DNR process is really focused on the developer. But when you think about the entire risk management lifecycle, you've got the manager, the director over that account, you've got the executive, which gets some of the notifications, you've got the risk practitioners, you've got the governing bodies that have to overlook all these. Where do they get their information? And that's where ARAM comes in. ARAM is our automated risk assessment and management. And that's simply the methodology which brings it all together. Where the DNR is focused to the developer, ARAM is focused on everyone else. So ARAM tracks both successes and failures, and we also keep history then. So when you think about an audit that occurs, they usually go back in time, so we keep that data so we can understand the trending of the application as well as the trending of the overall platform. So we show the overall platform, the control, and the use case results. So what does it really mean, right? What does it mean to have this type of transparency and this type of data? So we had a use case that was one of our future-looking solutions at State Farm, and it really was around how we're going to do a new rating engine. And they ran into scalability issues. And it was going to take 9 months to acquire, to actually get the hardware installed, to do all the loads, and to get it enabled for our business partner. And this was kind of early in our journey with AWS on the public cloud. So this is true trade secret data. So did we really want to put trade secret information on the public cloud in this type of time frame? And due to the transparency and the DNR process, it made all of our executives comfortable that they could make that decision and rely on those controls because they simply had evidence that they've never had before. And that type of decision making is where the value really comes in of painting the holistic picture. So you've seen all these components, right, that we've connected in order to enable this view, which is the DNR for the administrators and ARAM for everything else. So this is all about business agility and decreasing the time to market for all these approvals, because it takes long enough to actually develop a solution, but the process to get approval can take even longer. And that's what we're really focused on, is reducing that here. So here's our ARAM dashboard. The ribbon across the top stays consistent regardless of what view you're looking at. The dashboard is open to anyone inside our organization because we don't all know who is going to use it for what purpose. We know auditors, we know control testers, we know the leadership over the accounts, but there are other uses for it as well. So we made the determination that the information should be accessible inside our organization. So this view shows the controls as well as the use cases. Interestingly enough, one of the most frequently asked questions we get is, how many use cases do we have? So that was one of the first things that we put up on the dashboard so that we didn't have to keep answering that question. So you heard me talk about distillation before and the whole Rosetta Stone. And so when you think about the different languages, from a risk standpoint, you talk high level, right? You talk control objectives. So what this screenshot shows, and it's probably pretty small, but basically it's taking those high level control objectives and distilling them into those very specific DNRs that Jeff talked about. So how do we actually do that? We get a large group together quarterly, and we start by lessons learned, whether it's lessons we learned or someone else learned outside of State Farm, whether it's an internal lesson or something related to cloud. And we bring that in along with the emerging threat market with our cybersecurity friends. We bring internal audit into the conversation as well as enterprise risk management. We have our Cyber Defense Center as well as Jeff Michael's team that actually supports DNR. And lastly, we bring in our engineers from the actual use cases because they can tell us more what the impact of some of these controls are going to be. And then we look through and we distill those high-level control objectives, look at the new lessons learned, and determine if there's any new DNRs that need to be built, as well as every time AWS comes out with a new service, we need to evaluate that and determine if there's new DNRs related there as well. If my eyes were better, I could read the notes like Jeff can. But my eyes aren't that good. So here we've got the detailed information that we talked about. So think about the leadership over a use case. This screenshot goes actually down into the actual resource ID, and by simply hovering over it, so you'll see you got an orange light indicator that you've got a control problem. And by hovering over the actual description, In this case, we know that they've exceeded the 90-day threshold for a key that needed to be rotated. So in this case, they've got 10 resources, one of which has not had the key rotated on time. Now, would we actually stop them from going to production with that? Probably not, but we certainly will follow up via the DNR process. But this gives us that ability to look at this type of data and determine whether we need to hold up the use case from proceeding or not. So this view here is the account view. And again, we enable people to create their own custom view. So if you're a director and you have maybe 20 or 30 accounts under your purview, you can create and save a link so that you can just see yours, so that you understand how you're doing. Because the last thing you want to do is have your executive get the notification from DNR. So we intentionally went from the developer straight to the executive, because the executive, as Jeff said, owns the use case. And then we give, via ARAM, the ability for everyone else to monitor those notifications. So here's our control screen. So when we rolled this out, we created the concept of the platform control owner. So inside of our public cloud adoption team, we own almost all of these controls. We don't own all of them. But the control owner literally looks at ARAM every day to determine if they've got a control problem. And by problem, I mean someone not following what they're supposed to do. So we've set a lot of these thresholds literally at 100%. Because again, we're scanning the code, we're telling people ahead of time in test and everything that the DNRs are running. So by the time they get ready to go to production, they should be pretty clean, except for the ones that we've made an intentional decision to allow to proceed. But we do still run into communication issues, or where we have a problem, and that's where the control owner then can look at these reports, look at the dashboard, and understand if they need to do some planning, or they need to do a different communication plan, or something to increase the adherence rate. So we talked about escalation, and here's the view from an escalation standpoint, because that was one of the original things we did not build in. And rapidly, we had people, specifically some of the executives, want to go in and look ahead of time to see what's coming. One of the things, while we're using email today, we have plans to integrate our escalation into our issues management system, whether it be, a lot of companies might use Archer, any type of notification or formal issues or finding management system. Because email's great, but when you make it a formal finding, nobody wants those. So we find that by simply going that next step, we expect to drive our adherence rate even higher with that aspect. So what you've seen is this culmination that we've gone, and we've moved away from the opinion-based model, which our first use case took 6 months to get approval to go through. And I said before that we haven't made our 30-minute goal, but we have got down in under an hour, where we've completed the risk approval process so that the developers could actually deploy to production. So the opinion model has served us well, but it's simply we have data available to us today that we've never had before. We wouldn't be able to build some of this type of functionality in our on-prem platforms because the data simply isn't there. The whole principle around the DevSecOps model is to enable those developers to take on more and more to increase their speed. And the DNR and the ARAM gives us those guardrails so that we can allow them to go faster and faster. So a lot of times when you use analogies, cars again, why do brakes exist? They actually don't exist to stop you. They exist to enable you to go fast with confidence. So what the DNR and ARAM process gives us the ability to do is turn the developers loose, because we have the guardrails that are going to notify us, and in the event of the auto-remediation, actually prevent some of those. So while I've talked a lot about opinions and not being a big fan of them, one thing we do need all of you to do is complete the feedback session. So that is your opportunity to give your opinion, and because that data is certainly used by AWS to create the sessions next year and on. So with that, we will entertain any questions. Sure.
So on the technical side, have you had to deal with API throttling or anything like that? Got any calls?
I did not hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I said, have you had to deal with any API throttling with that many calls going into AWS?
API throttling.
Oh, throttling. Oh, yeah, we have. So we've run into some of the API throttling issues, well, it depends on what you're saying. On doing the actual checks against the APIs? Yeah. Yeah, sorry. The question that they asked was, have we run into any API gateway throttling issues when we were querying API gateway? The answer is yes, and what we have to do is we've had to put in some retry logic and some basically also some wait logic to allow us to actually go through without overloading the system. So we have run into multiple services that have had throttling issues. And like I said, we've been able to work around it by setting up retry logic and some wait logic in there whenever we run into that.
And then my second question was on your emails. So how do you maintain the list of the leadership line?
That is an actual very, very good point, and I'm sorry I forgot to actually mention that. So the question was, how do we know about leadership changes and those account administrator changes? Well, Dennis comes from the team called the Public Cloud Adoption Team. They are the account owners, or AWS platform owners. And they actually maintain a database of that information. And your question is, well, does this stuff get out of date? Yes. But let me tell you, nothing gets someone to update that information faster than getting emails they don't want. So they go through and they update that information. From the business executive side, that actually changes very infrequently, but it's also kind of the same deal. So if a business executive changes or a business account signatory changes on an account, they will get that notification. They will usually respond back and say, this is no longer me, it's this person. And then we contact the account administrators to get that information updated. But yeah, our Lambda functions query that to get those lists of individuals and then send those email notifications out. And that is a very important thing. This is very dependent on information and managing those AWS accounts. Having those back-end processes and ownership to actually make sure that we have information about who owns these things, about who's responsible for it. And because we have a centralized platform owner in our organization, we can impose those types of requirements. And they have been great from a security side because, man, otherwise identifying those individuals would be really difficult.
Because we actually went more secure or more risk averse on this platform than we did others. We made a choice to treat all data like it's SPI, whether it's the cafeteria menu or my actual social security number. And we did that because it's cheap enough to do. We require that we tag it so we know what it is in the event we change that posture, but we treat all data on the cloud like it's SPI.
Yeah, so we have these information security policies that basically state you must secure this type of information based on the categorization or the classification. The platform, but there's no one says that you can't do more. And the platform owners made that decision that they were going to do more. And worked out great. It also made it a lot easier because by saying we have to secure this information to SPI levels, I don't have to determine what type of data there is anymore. I don't have to go through and say, oh my gosh, is this SPI information? It just, boom, everyone's treated the same.
And in 3.5 years, we have yet to make an exception on encryption, as an example.
Yep. Nobody. If anyone has to make an exception on encryption, it's because they're putting in a vendor solution that forces them not to do it.
And then the last question I had was, how are you, I'm assuming you're running this centralized like an organization account. And then how are you dealing with access to each of those 400 accounts? Access keys, you do it roles?
Nope, we're doing roles, and that's part of the new account build process. That is an entirely automated process. The platform owners have an automation process that they use to build. It sets up all of the initial roles, and for that, one of those roles is the DNR role. And it's a read-only role. It doesn't have any access to data because we are not scanning data at this time. And we kind of go through that, and that gets built and has a trust back to our account and to the role that we're actually executing from the ECS, from our Fargate instance, so that ECS task.
And we did also build audits access in upfront as well, which a little bit of a, I'll say there were conversations early on, but again, to enable that transparency, that was one of the decisions we made.
Mm-hmm.
We had a question over here.
So it's a two-part question, but they're related. How effective have you found the emails to be, since those are really kind of passive communications and very easy to ignore? And you also mentioned that a lot of your emails are, hey, we found this finding. If you don't do anything about it, we're going to do something about it automatically in such a date. How often do you find people just like, oh, we're fine with that shutting down, and they just take no action?
So how often do they allow for the remediation?
No, so how often, rather than actively remediating it, do they just say, oh, we're fine letting that handle automatically in 60 days?
Actually, we don't see that very much. For the most part, what really deters them is the escalation. They don't want the escalation, and we never remediate, unless it's a critical thing, we never remediate before escalation if we're scheduling it. So what really does it is the escalation. And to answer your question, yes, we're looking at alternative means like opening up an actual risk finding on there. We're trying to figure out when should we do this, for what levels, and that sort of thing, so we have active work that's going on to it. I've actually found the emails to be very effective, actually, because one of the things is the ARAM, you can go out to the ARAM, set up your pages, and actually view your information. People very rarely actively go out there to look at that information. But if they get a daily notification, they can choose to ignore it, but what I'm finding is the account administrators don't. They open it up. One, if they have nothing, they do notice when they get it in the morning. If they do have it regularly, like they've got findings in their account, let's a test account, and there's regularly have stuff in it, they go in there religiously and check and see if anything's going to be escalating. They really do. The few times that we've had escalations, it has not gone off. They've had so much post work that they had to do to explain to the executive why they had it and why they didn't do anything. Because one of the things I also send to the executive isn't just, hey, this thing has been escalated. I send them how many times I notified the account administrators.
So if you think about, if your boss isn't happy with you, that's not as bad. But when 2 levels up, actual officers of the company aren't happy, that's when things change.
Yep. So yeah, I send them, okay, here's when we found this, and here's the number of times we notified the business partner to this error. So you look at it
once.
Yep.
And then after that, the director and the manager get involved and start monitoring ahead.
Yep. So actually, it works fairly well. We've had this discussion. One of the things you might run, we actually do some checks that are non-risk based. So like, for example, we look for some compliance checks around tagging requirements. We look at some cost optimization checks, like we will actually go out and look at Trusted Advisor and report back the Trusted Advisor findings around cost optimization. And we don't have escalations for those because some of those don't have escalations. Those get ignored. They get ignored. Now, but the moment we put an escalation on it, they don't get ignored. They might wait till the last minute, but they don't get ignored.
I mean, the key to your success really is that so many people in your organization, like you said, at the doers, at their bosses, and 2 levels up, have adopted the platform and actually use the dashboard and pay attention to it.
Yep.
I always say it's easy to write software. The hardest thing is get people to use it. You guys have gotten people to use it. Okay, emails might be a little archaic, and could it be more modern or sexier or a different approach, but it doesn't have to be all the time, right? So, and this works for you guys because everybody adopts it.
And it's
everybody
data, it's
it.
real.
Right. And understand, it's learning. It's not just about smacking the person on the wrist and saying, ooh, you did bad. It's teaching them that those guardrails, by having those guardrails, they learn they're not supposed to do that and they don't do it again. So when they're putting together automation for their build, and they're like, ooh, I need to A lot of people, I mean, we're developers, right? We copy and paste, right? So a lot of those guys, oh, well, I had to build an EBS block storage device and I need to have it encrypted. I'm going to copy and if I need to have it encrypted and I got dinged and then I set it up to be encrypted, the next time I built it, I'm going to copy and paste that and I'm going to make sure it's encrypted the next time. So what we actually see is the numbers go down. The only time we start seeing a spike is when we introduce a new test. And then when we introduce a new test, you'll see a spike in the number of total resources we have and the number of failures, and then it'll go down.
And a lot of times it's because we're applying a new rule to an existing account, and we have to give them time to come into adherence.
Yeah. Real quick before we take that next question, just want to invite everybody, there's a financial services industry lounge on the 4th floor. There's a reception at 5 o'clock, so pretty much right now, drinks and hors d'oeuvres, so please feel free to come up to the 4th floor, West Alcove, right above us. And then everybody loves demos, so the financial services industry demos is at the AWS Village Hall C. So I believe that's down one and all the way to all where the halls are. Booth 1719, not that you're going to remember that, but just go to the Village Hall C and you get some demos specific to financial services. Okay? So yeah, next question, please.
Okay, so my question is, in the D and testing part of DNR, how do you handle like recently published vulnerabilities? Like a new CVE has come out, or Microsoft's just announced, a major vulnerability, or do you have a process of someone who is aware of that and creates, how is that integrated into DNR?
In a lot of cases, what you're kind of describing are things like platform vulnerabilities, patch vulnerabilities. Yeah. We actually have a product at State Farm that we actually use in the cloud. So if you have a virtual instance running, we actually have a product that actually will look to see if the operating system that you're running on has any known vulnerabilities. Yeah. DNR does two things. One, we check to make sure that you have that agent running. Mm-hmm. Two, we actually go to the source and we actually pull back any vulnerabilities you do have and report on it.
Huh, cool.
So business partners, if they're running an EC2 instance and they've got vulnerabilities, they know it.
Yeah. My other question is the dashboard for ARAM is just beautiful. Did y'all develop that in-house or use a third-party tool? Because it's really beautiful.
We developed it in-house, and it's on QuickSight.
Oh, cool.
Directly to DynamoDB, right? You just write queries?
No, actually. We pull in they pull in a Parquet file.
Yeah.
Okay.
From DNR.
Okay.
Yep. Because they don't, even though we run hourly, they update their stuff daily from their perspective. They just need the information daily.
Yep.
But to think about this, we know on an hourly basis the state of our environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hi. That actually kind of answers my question. I'm curious what your ETL process is to get from Dynamo to your source Parquet to where your dashboard comes out to QuickSight. I'm curious what services you might use, and you like behind a Hive table, or how are you going about that ETL process?
Well, I could. We dump our findings from our DynamoDB table into an S3 bucket and then give their account access to the S3 bucket. So we format that into a Parquet file, which they then pick up. Now, how they're loading it, that I can't remember how that is actually. They're picking it up from us, but I can't remember how they're loading that. I think, are we doing that in Glue? I can't remember how that's being loaded.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.